Welcome, everybody, to the Read Your Keys podcast. I am your host, Joel Lopez, and today I have my guest, David, who runs the Latinos for Liberty on Twitter. And like I say, for a lot of guests, I found him via Twitter. I think he's got some interesting ideas, and being liberty-minded and also being Latino, I thought that he would be a great guest to have on here, so we could have a discussion about what that looks like, or what his ideas are around that. So welcome to the show today, David.
Thank you for having me.
So we'll go ahead and get straight into it, David. First of all, where are you currently located? Geographically here in the States.
Right now, I'm currently in Maryland. I came from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and right now I'm just here temporarily. By next year, I'll be going back to Philadelphia, but officially, as of right now, I'm in Maryland.
Mm-hmm. Were you born and raised there in Philly then?
No, I was actually born and raised in New Jersey. It's it was actually part of my journey was escaping New Jersey because I don't know if you are familiar with my story, but it's like it's my pinned tweet for a little while, is that pretty much what red pilled me and kind of opened my eyes to just liberty in general was the Second Amendment. It wasn't until I started bearing arms that I actually started opening my eyes to a lot of other liberty issues. So living in New Jersey is a terrible state for the Second Amendment. There's pretty much no such thing as concealed carry or open carry. None of that. It's considered a may issue state, meaning they may issue you a concealed carry permit, but you would have to demonstrate a need. And pretty much they make it impossible if you're not prior law enforcement, or if you aren't in some type of business where it's clearly necessary, then they don't deem you needing to carry a weapon on you. You can't just be a regular person like me and just drive around with a gun in your car. So that was a big eye opener for me. I remember writing a letter to Chris Christie because he was the governor at the time. Okay. And what I got back was pretty much just a generic response of no gun control legislation has reached my desk, but I'll certainly take your concerns into consideration. Political BS. Right. So that was pretty much my green light to leave the state, and that's what brought me to Philly. It really felt like I moved to a whole other country because it really felt free.
Really, because I thought that the gun laws would have been just as strict in Philadelphia as they were in New Jersey.
Yeah, you would think so.
It's not the case, though?
No, it's not the case. Because the way that the law is written in Pennsylvania is that the cities cannot overwrite the state law. And the state law has very good gun laws. I mean, it's an open carry state. You don't need a permit.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you do. You can't open carry in Philadelphia. That's the only that's the only city where you can't open carry in Pennsylvania. And that's actually part of Pennsylvania law. Because it says that any city that it has more than 1 million residents is considered like a Division I city, and you can't open carry in such a city. So that's the only city where you can't open carry. But pretty much everything else is, it's fair game. You can conceal carry. I mean, I had my carry permit in Philly, and there are pretty much no gun restrictions at all. Not like Jersey, you have like the capacity of the magazine that's like restricted to I think 15 or maybe even less. And
for a handgun?
What was that?
For a handgun?
For anything.
For anything, huh?
Yeah, so that's why my first AR-15 that I actually bought it living in New Jersey. And it has to be like a modified version that makes it legal in New Jersey. Like it can't have an adjustable stock. It can't the magazine has to be like 10 rounds or less or something. Like when you're buying it stock from the store. So there's a lot of regulation. It's just a big mess in Jersey, honestly.
I had a question about being in Jersey. You said a prior law enforcement. What about military? If coming back from the military, were they getting it, or?
I hadn't heard of that being the case because I've had military friends who are also into guns. To my knowledge, that wouldn't be a qualifying case for you to
really. So you could come back from serving your country and go back to Jersey, and you have to get rid of your gun, or basically you'd be breaking the law in Jersey if you had them then.
Yep. Absolutely.
Well, that's interesting because I'm a West Coast guy, so just how close everything is on the East Coast. So how far is it that far to go from Jersey to Philly?
No, not at all. Well, I mean, depending where you live. I live literally right over the bridge that separates Philly and Pennsylvania. So
Oh,
I'm
that's all
sorry,
that is.
Philly and New Jersey.
Jersey, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So
Okay, so
it was
it's
like
like
a
a
20-minute ride.
wow.
Yeah,
What's
and a
the
whole new country. Like you cross that bridge and everything is different. It's insane.
is the tax situation similar or
Yeah, I mean, ultimately Philly is a blue city and is run by
mhm,
a very, very ineffective mayor. His name is Mayor
mhm,
Kenny.
mhm,
They pull taxes out of thin air. Like they just
mhm.
try to invent taxes, for whatever
Yeah.
reason. They had like the whole soda tax going on for a while.
Oh,
Uh,
they had that there too, huh?
yeah,
I thought that was just New York that did that.
Oh no, no. Unfortunately, is that their cancer has spread. But yeah, even like, and nobody in Philly even likes it. Like nobody that I know supports it. And when you go to the businesses, it has like signs against it saying like there's like a whole slogan saying "Axe
Yeah.
the tax," and
Uh-huh.
and that was making the mayor mad because he's like, oh, why are you gonna get people mad about this? Blah blah. It's
Uh-huh.
better off if they don't even think about it. But yeah, that's who we're dealing with, man. We're dealing with a tax, a tax crazy
Heavy-handed
person.
taxes.
There
Yeah.
you go. Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
that's what I was trying
let
to say.
me ask David. So, what was the interest in firearms in the first place? How did that come about?
It was really crazy, man, because it really wasn't me like searching for liberty.
Hmm.
This is like the lamest story ever, but I was with a girl at the time, and she wanted a dog really, really bad,
Hmm.
and I at that time I really hated dogs because I never had one at that point. I didn't realize
Uh-huh.
how awesome they were, but I
Uh-huh.
really hated dogs at that point. And we were living together, so I was like, and she was my wife. She's actually my ex-wife,
Uh-huh.
and I was like, man, if you want to get a dog, then you're gonna have to compromise. And I was turning 21 at the time. I was like, I want to get a handgun. And
Mm.
and she was like, damn, because she was like a left winger. She's like, about the Second Amendment, because I didn't know shit about politics. I knew
Yeah.
nothing, man.
Uh-huh.
So she's like, about the Second Amendment? I was like, yeah, man, I know at least that much.
Yeah.
So, that was the trade-off. She got a gun. I mean, she got a dog. I got a gun. And from there, man, like the scales just literally dropped from
Hey,
my
wait a minute, wait a minute, wait. So were you trying to just to say that so you wouldn't get the
Yeah,
dog? You're like, oh,
I
I'm gonna
would
say
have
something
never.
wild.
Yeah, I would have never thought she would agree to me having a gun, man. She was like a radical left winger. She was so against all these
You're like,
things.
she doesn't really want me to
Yeah,
have a gun. We'll squash the dog talk by
right.
getting a gun.
Yep,
That's funny.
exactly.
Yeah, that's actually pretty funny, man. That's a great story. What are you talking
Yeah.
about?
Yeah, so yeah, man. So she went ahead and got the dog. So I was like, all right,
Oh,
man.
I gotta pull through my end now, huh?
Yeah,
I can't go out like
right.
that.
Yeah, and I always thought guns were cool. I just never
Uh-huh.
had one. I was never against them. I just, I never saw like what everybody else saw, and until I actually went out and bought one.
Hmm.
So yeah, that was how everything pretty much started for me. It was really
So
by
then, you were not in Jersey anymore? Then you guys were probably in Philly, right? Because you said that you weren't allowed to have, or
well,
you
no,
couldn't
you
get it.
can you can have guns in New Jersey. You can't carry
Oh, you
guns.
can't carry. That's right. That's
Right,
right.
right.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
You
right.
can
Yeah.
have them in your home, and
Yeah.
they're subject to those capacity limits and all that.
Hmm.
But yeah, you in New Jersey, you have to apply for a purchaser's permit,
Hmm.
meaning you can't go and purchase a gun without having that permit to purchase it.
Uh-huh.
So that that's pretty much the only hurdle, and it's like a 2 month process. But yeah, getting the gun actually wasn't hard. You just got to really keep up with all the regulations and make sure that you're not getting anything illegal because it's very
Yeah.
easy for that to happen in Jersey.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I remember something about like I read a story where a guy had like an antique gun. This might have been within like the last 5 years because I have kids now, so my memory is foggy. So it's
Yeah.
within like the last 5 years. But I think the guy was driving from like Florida, and I don't know if he drove into Jersey or something like that. I might be getting like the specific facts wrong, but
Hmm.
he had like some antique gun, some 1700s gun or whatever, and I think he got arrested for having that. And it's like this was like an antique gun that he had, and I was like, really, you guys are messing with this man? He's just
Yeah.
a collector, and they got him for that. And I was like, man, that's pretty silly.
Oh yeah, and that's Jersey for you, man. Because there's tons of people who legally carry their weapon in Philadelphia, and they cross the bridge, and sometimes they forget they have a gun on them.
Hmm.
That's happened to me plenty of times.
Yeah, now
So
you're a
I'm in New
lawbreaker.
Jersey now with a loaded gun on me, and that's
Yeah,
just like a huge no-no in that state.
yeah.
So there have been people who have been imprisoned for that, even though they're legally carrying in Philadelphia. Once they cross that bridge into Jersey, if they get
Mhm.
caught, they're subject to the penalties. And that happened. A lady who got pulled over, she was upfront with the officer. She said, I have a concealed carry license and there's a firearm in the car. And that perhaps was the biggest mistake that she made. She was in prison. And Chris Christie had to actually pardon her. But I just thought it was insane, man, how you can legally carry, 20 minutes away, and then you just cross an imaginary line and bam, it's like you're a criminal now.
Right. All you did was go into a different city, like like you said, just cross this bridge. So how long were you in Jersey when you made the move to Philly? Because this was something that was just I don't know, like a burning. I guess is that where the kind of that flame of, I mean, it might sound cheesy, but that flame of like, oh, am I really free? Kind of started
absolutely
burning inside of you.
Yeah, for sure. So I was like 22, 23 around there when I moved to Philly. And from then on, I never returned to Jersey, obviously to visit, but never to live again. And I never will. Just because, like they say, like a mind that's been expanded could never go back to its old dimensions. That's pretty much how I feel, man. When I'm in New Jersey, I just feel like I'm just living like a very like safeguarded life, and it's just, I don't know, it's just not my style at all, man.
Well, more so constrained than maybe is that a better word? It's like, hey, I'm able to have the space to be more free in Philly, where I can carry my firearm. And I'm sure, like, once you have that feeling of carrying it, that now when you don't carry it, be like you don't have your wallet on you, or you don't have your keys on you, or your phone.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, I don't have my firearm.
Yeah, that's exactly how it was, man. Like, you leave the house, you grab your wallet, your phone, your gun, your keys, and bam, you leave. And that was the norm forever until I came to this godforsaken state. This is another New Jersey. I did it myself. I came to Maryland, but it was all with a plan, because I'm returning back to Philly and in like the spring of next year. So it was just a sacrifice I made for my family. It was like a job opportunity where I just came out here, just to spend like a couple years out here and then return. So trust me, man, I would have never thought I would have lived in Maryland prior to moving here.
How long have you been there for? You said a year now?
Yeah, I came here not this past summer, but the summer before that.
So you've been there 2 years then?
Well,
this is 1 year, and then you'll be there till next spring.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
A little less than 2 years.
A little less than 2 years.
Yeah.
So you get the firearm, or you kind of run into the bureaucratic tape of trying to get a firearm.
Yeah.
No kind of in civics that you're supposed to take civics in high school. So I don't remember really delving into the Second Amendment in civics or school at all. I'm from California, so so when you talk about, like, this isn't something, I didn't grow up in gun culture. I didn't grow up with family, anybody I knew, period, having a firearm. So that's not something that I thought about. Right. But for you, it was okay. Now I told my wife, or my girlfriend at the time, that she wanted a dog, so I'm getting a gun. So I guess I'm gonna go get a gun. So what kind of alarms or flags are going off in your head, like, in going through that process?
It was definitely very new. So there was that that initial shock of first seeing a gun, going to a shooting range, and then shooting one and just feeling all the power. Like, all of that was brand new to me. Just like you, my family, gun culture was not a thing. Like, they frown upon guns. They see it as, only bad people owning them. So it was really all new waters that I was navigating. So everything was, I did it with extreme caution, because to me, it felt like I was dealing with a bomb or something.
Right. Yeah. No, that sounds accurate. Yeah.
Right. So I approached it with as much education as I possibly could get my hands on at the time. And I really just had to inculcate that culture in my own home, because I really don't have any role model or anybody that I can look up to who has done that. But it's funny, because now that I got a gun, now, like, damn near everybody in my family has guns.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Because what I would do is, because I didn't just buy one gun. I did, like, gun after gun after gun, and I just had, like, a whole collection after a while. And what I would do is I would just invite them to come to the shooting range with me, and all expenses paid. Like, literally, all they have to do is come. I'll buy the ammo. They can shoot my guns, and everybody who I take loves it, man. Like, nobody has ever been upset with me because I took them, and nobody has anything bad to say. Like literally everybody who has shot a gun has felt empowered enough to go and buy their own gun.
Wow.
My dad, he was very anti-gun, man. He's anti like everything. Like I don't like he's like very, very traditional, like Hispanic man, and he doesn't cause problems with anybody. He's just very like to himself. And he was very against guns. But there was one Father's Day where I took him to the shooting range, and I let him shoot all my guns. And out of all the guns that he shot, the one that he loved the most was the one that everybody's afraid of, the AR-15.
That's what I figured. Yeah.
Yeah. It's little recoil. It's very easy to use. Like there's no reason not to like it, honestly.
It's fun.
Yeah, it's right? a very well-made gun. So, yeah, man. So ever since I did that, now, like, I feel like every male in my family has guns now. But, and that's something that I'm glad because, I kind of like started that. And I feel like ultimately it is to the benefit of my family, because the people who own it, they all own it legally. You know what I mean?
And so going to your family, are you first generation or second generation?
Yes, first generation.
Okay.
Yeah. So my dad came here from El Salvador. Well, so I'm kind of like half and half because my mom was already here, but my dad came here from El Salvador. So it's like I kind of am first generation, but my mom was already here. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like, what is it, like 1.5 kind of thing?
Yeah. Right. Right.
Well, because that's kind of the same for me. So like, my mom is from Mexico. My dad was born here, over there, but he was raised here. Okay. So I spoke English to my dad and I spoke Spanish to my mom.
Oh, okay.
So that's so like when I go back, they'll be like, "Man, you talk funny," and it's like, "Well, I was raised in America. I spoke English to my dad, or as opposed to like both parents are speaking Spanish." But I can read and I wouldn't really want to write, but I can read and speak well enough to have okay conversations, but I wouldn't want to have this conversation in Spanish.
Right. No, and I'm kind of on the same boat, man. Like my parents actually, they spoke to each other in English, so learning Spanish for me was like a big barrier because I actually had to learn, like it's not something that I could just like easily pick up. But my grandma, who is from El Salvador, she doesn't speak any English, and she lived with us my entire life, like until I was an adult in my parents' house, like 18 when I left. She was still there. It's from when I was born, and so she was pretty much my babysitter. And she's really the only reason why I do speak Spanish today. It wasn't because of my parents. Like even today, when I talk to my parents, it's 100% in English. Because my dad, that was the first thing he did when he came here was learn English.
Learned English.
Yeah. So, but yeah, if it wasn't for my grandma, I wouldn't speak Spanish at all. But I'm on the same boat. Like I wouldn't be comfortable having like a full blown like conversation right now, on a podcast in Spanish. But I can definitely talk to anybody and express whatever I want to say to anyone. You know what I mean? Like I went to El Salvador in 2015, and it was the first time that I had gone by myself. And, landing in the airport, everything's kind of like scary because, you just think about everything you see on the news. Like, damn, El Salvador is kind of dangerous. I'm an American, and it's very clear that I'm American.
Yeah. You know it. So, they look at your shoes and your clothes like this dude's not from around here.
Even when I try to tone it down, they know like, nah, he's from out of town.
Yeah.
So, and it's funny because I got into my little rental car and I had a GPS, but this GPS was like from the 90s, man. Like this thing was trash.
Yeah.
And, like where I needed to go, the GPS had no idea like what I was even putting into it. So I literally had to rely on directions from like the people around, and from where the airport was to where my grandma lives, because she moved back. That's who I was visiting. From where the airport is to where she lives, that's like an hour and a half drive. So imagine like having to get around El Salvador, you know what I mean? And Spanish, I could speak Spanish. It wasn't my dominant language, but I knew enough to get around and make it work, you know what I mean, to get to my destination. But I thought that was like a cool experience at the end of the day. It wouldn't have not been possible if I didn't speak any Spanish.
And the thing too is like you think driving in America is crazy. You go like you get over there and you're like, man, this is some next level stuff. Like my family was California, so we'd cross over to Mexico, Tijuana. And as soon as you cross the border, it's like a free for all, man. And they have these roundabouts, and you're just like, oh man, this is you're trying to learn the rules as you're going through, and nobody's waiting for you, man. So you better learn real quick.
Right.
I,
Fortunately for me is that I'm a crazy driver over here, and I've always been one. And so when I go to these other countries, that's one thing I actually like to do when I visit a country is that I like to rent a car and explore, and I like
mhm,
to drive and see how these people drive too. And like
mhm.
so when I got to El Salvador, it was really fun, just like kind of being out of the norm and being crazy, just like being a crazy driver and knowing that I'm not going to get pulled over for it.
Yeah.
Because you
Well,
hardly see
unless they knew they knew that, hey, this dude's an American, and we're gonna try
yeah,
and pull him over for that reason.
yeah.
Was that your first time heading over there, or just your first time heading over there by yourself?
Yeah, that was my first time heading over there.
Also, you'd never been there before.
No. Oh no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. No, I went there once. I went there for a month as an adult, but I didn't go there by myself. It was the
Yeah,
second time that I went by myself.
gotcha.
Yeah.
And have you done quite a bit of traveling since then to other countries?
Oh yeah, I've been to Costa Rica. I've been to Mexico. I've been
Mhm.
to Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Spain, Israel. Where else? Where else? I think is that it? Yeah, I think that might be
That's
it.
quite a few, though, man.
Yeah. I
Quite
try.
a
I
bit.
try to go to Spanish speaking countries. Like that's just what attracts me the most. And with the exception of Israel, that's a totally
Yeah,
different ball game
yeah.
right there. But yeah, man, traveling is definitely cool, man, and getting to see the people and driving around them, seeing what they live like, and sparking up conversations, man. Like there's no like tour that I've ever taken that compares to that, man.
Hmm. Let me ask: when you were traveling to these other countries, was this after your experience with trying to get a firearm, or before?
This was, let me see, I'm trying to do the timeline. This was mostly before.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um. So it's kind of going back to the liberty issue. Um. You try to get your firearm, and you meet this resistance. So what kind of research did you start doing, or what kind of path did that lead you on? Because you talk about not even being concerned with the Second Amendment. Was there an awareness of the Constitution at this point? I
Yeah,
mean,
I had
I think we kind of know some from school, but like
right.
it's one thing to kind of like hear about it and be like, oh yeah, the Constitution, blah blah blah
Right.
blah blah. But it's another thing to be like, oh, uh, I'm not seeing the state I live in line up to what it says here.
Yeah, so in school I definitely didn't learn the Second Amendment at all. I don't have any recollection of learning that in school. Somehow I came across I came across that knowledge as an adult, like a young adult, like 18, 19,
Mm-hmm.
maybe even before that. But I just thought it was cool. I'm like, all right, that's cool, man. In our Constitution, like it says we can have guns. Like I always
Mm-hmm.
thought the idea of that sounded cool,
Mm-hmm.
but I never actually pursued it, until when I actually did. I saw like first I had to apply for that permit. I had to do like all this fingerprinting and submit the application and wait like 2 months. And I saw that the state technically had 30 days to get back to me, and it took like a little over 2 months. I'm like, damn, that sounds like very inefficient. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, all right, whatever. And I started doing the research on what kind of guns I can get, what kinds I can't get. The whole issue with the limited capacity magazines. There's certain bullets that are not legal in New Jersey, like the armor piercing bullets, like hollow tips, things like
Mm-hmm.
that. The transportation of firearms from like your home to a shooting range, it's like very regulated. Like pretty much you have to put your firearm in the back of your trunk and separate the gun from the ammo and have them locked separately. And you can only go from your house to the shooting range. You're not even legally allowed to make any stops anywhere. Like it has to go
So
from your
like
house to the
if you need to get gas, it's like you better gas up
right,
before.
right. I
Um,
hope they wouldn't be that much of a pain with it. But yeah, that's the way that the law is written. It's like you can
yeah.
only go either from your home to a gunsmith or from your home to a shooting range, and that's it. If you go anywhere else, then you open yourself up to legal problems if
Mm-hmm.
if you do get caught. So I always thought that was just so crazy. When I read the words of the Second Amendment, I'm like, man, it says shall not be infringed. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
if the Second Amendment only applied to me when I'm in my home, then the Second Amendment isn't really doing me any good because, before COVID, I was spending more time out of my home than in the home because I was a working adult. So I'm like, I just feel like I should have protection everywhere I go. you know. So just little by little, I started noticing just little things here and there in New Jersey. And then at that same time, um, Barack Obama was going after AR-15s like really, really strong. This was like during like Sandy Hook with the shooting and all that. So he was really pursuing, just making these guns illegal. And that was a red flag to me. That was like my green light to like, all right, I need to go and buy me one of these guns before they become illegal. And so like I just started noticing who was working against me and my rights, like, and it was clearly the left was working against my rights to bear arms. Even though I'm sorry, did I say the left?
Yeah.
I don't know if I said the left, but I meant the left was working against me. The right does too, but it's like a very small scale. It does happen though, that the right, they compromise on gun rights and things like that. But the ones who are like emboldened to go after you and they're not even trying to hide it, that's without a doubt the Democrats. Joe Biden, he made AR-15s illegal for 10 years already. The things that he's proposing, if he wins the presidency, it's just abominable, man. It's just really, really crazy.
I don't like to use labels, but just for the sake of having concepts, like, would you have to, before you purchased your firearm or went through that process, would you have considered yourself a Democrat or voted a Democrat?
100%, man. I never thought I would have considered myself anything other than a Democrat. And I don't even know why, because I was very apolitical, like I felt like I just was supposed to be a Democrat. Where I grew up in New Jersey was very diverse. It was literally like a split between white, black, and Hispanic. It was like an even split. It was like 33% white, like damn near 33% Hispanic, and then the rest were African American. So where I live, like it was like expected of you to be a Democrat. Like even all the white people where I'm from are Democrats, and I never really came across a Republican. So the way that I was like trained was to view them as the enemy. Like they're the ones who are working against me. And so like I just never considered it. So even when I was a gun owner, I was still identified as a Democrat, but there just came a point where I'm just like, I can't co-sign this any longer. Like I remember like when Obama first came into office, I was pro Obama 100%. I thought it was the thing of the century. I'm like, first black president, I'm alive and history is being made, blah, blah, blah. But from that point, from the beginning of his first term to like the middle of his second term, that middle of his second term is where I really started making a lot of changes politically. And that's where I was just like, nah, like something's got to change. And I actually started moving more towards Republicans. And I was a registered Republican because what I was really attracted to was the idea of limited government and small taxes. And this is something that I really thought that Republicans were like all about, like the way that libertarians are, like, because I didn't know what libertarians were back then. I had no idea. I never even heard the term. But when I heard that they were about small government and low taxes, that's what really, really grabbed my attention, because I've never been one for rules, man. I really, really hate excessive regulation, And so that's what called out to me, and so that led to me becoming a registered Republican. And I just had to build upon like all of the information I was learning as I went on.
What kind of sources or what kind of places were you going to kind of get the information that you were looking for, or for people who were having the conversation that was kind of burning inside of you to figure out like, hey, like who's talking about this? And so it sounds like Republicans are having it, but where were you trying to find more information to, I don't know if strengthen the argument is the best way to put it, but just to kind of, hey, I want to explore this idea. I have this idea of liberty. Maybe if you don't know it, the right term for it, like you said, I don't know, what a libertarian is, but where were you going to help you kind of flesh out your thought process?
So like first, when I started identifying like as a Republican, that process, like pretty much like what planted the seeds of that was watching Obama debate Mitt Romney for the second term.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like the first time I actually started paying attention to what people were saying in politics. So I actually heard a lot of things from Mitt Romney that I liked, and I don't even remember specifically what they were at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But I just remember hearing Mitt Romney speak, and I'm just like, man, this guy is not as bad as I thought he would be. Just like what I was led to believe about Republicans. I was like, this guy's very civil. He's very smart. He's putting forth good arguments. Like, he did say things I didn't agree with, like the whole self-deportation thing. I thought was kind of ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
But like I just started noticing, like, all right, maybe I was misled to believe one thing about this group of people, and I should maybe just listen to what they have to say. So that was like when Obama was debating for his second term. So that's really what planted the seed. So that's when I started following accounts that did not align with me politically at that time. I remember I started following like Alan West, Ben Shapiro, and like a whole bunch of other people. I don't even remember, to be honest, but I used to, that's when I started getting into politics. I would even like be in the comments debating with people like certain ideas. And it just kind of was like, I felt like I was just learning as I was going, you know what I mean?
This is all through Twitter?
Facebook, actually.
Facebook, okay.
Yeah, I'm fairly new to Twitter.
Yeah.
On Facebook, I was just like, it was just my own personal account. So pretty much everybody that knew me growing up and all of my family, they were all on there. And that's actually why I had to leave Facebook, man, because my political views changed, and you know how polarized things have gotten.
Yeah.
I just completely was like, I just wanted nothing to do with Democrats, and especially Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
Like, I was like so anti-Hillary Clinton, like in that race in 2016. So I was putting out like all this information was anti-Hillary, and it created a lot of enemies, with people that are related to me and people I grew up with.
Yeah.
So, little by little, it just got old. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna ditch Facebook. I still have the account open, but I'm like never post on there.
Well, I think it's like, hey, you want to have the conversation, but you want to save the relationship. It's like, I'm not trying to burn bridges. I'm just trying to flesh out arguments, because I know, like, with me and my friends, all we did was argue. We would argue about anything, and that was just kind of like what we did. It was just fun to argue. Like, you'd find something to argue about and just argue about it. But I think that now, people take this in a much more personal way than anything else. I think for me, what's been kind of fascinating or strange is, I don't know if I'm older than you, but like after 9/11, the Patriot Act is coming through, and Democrats are making the argument that, liberty over security.
Right.
And I'm like, these people have a valid point. And I would think that, being from California and everything, that's where I leaned towards was Democrat, because, the ACLU, things like that. It was like, they would talk about, in Skokie, Illinois, there was skinheads who went to Skokie because that's where there was a lot of Holocaust survivors, and they wanted to march through skinheads, neo-Nazis, and the ACLU defended them. And it's just like, well, you don't have to agree with their message, but they do have freedom of speech. And so that's kind of what I identified with the left. And then so when the Patriot Act is coming through and they're having the discussion, they're talking about liberty over security. And it's like, yeah, this thing that happened with 9/11 is awful, terrible, but hey, are we going to be giving up our rights? And I thought that was a valid argument to have. And now fast forward, less than 20 years, and now, it seems like the left is now coming after rights, not only gun rights, which is, I think they kind of always had that position, because it wasn't something that I concerned myself with anyway. I was actually anti-gun for the most part until, like a lot of your family members, I had the experience. So I went from California to Arizona, and so when I got here, the first time I saw somebody open carrying, it was like, what are you doing? Like you said, that bomb analogy, it felt like he had a bomb, and it was like, dude, what are you doing? Like, this dude is just carrying this around. Like, is this did I just come to the wild, wild west?
Where are you now?
I'm in Arizona.
Oh,
Phoenix,
okay.
Phoenix, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Big difference from California.
Big difference. And it's like a 5-hour drive from LA.
Oh, wow.
I'm originally from LA. Here, but it was just like a culture shock. It's like, oh, they're carrying firearms. So that was pretty big for me. And then having a family, and it's like, okay, like I want to protect my family, which
Mhm.
I think is for a lot of people that you start thinking about in different terms, whereas before it was just me. So it's like, okay, like
Right.
it's, or me and my wife, I should say, but we're adults. So, but once you have that family, it does change your perspective on a lot of things.
Hmm.
But the left, it seems like it has, was a big shift in my opinion on those issues. Did you notice the same thing, or were you not really paying attention at that time?
A big shift on what,
On
guns?
just on liberty in general,
Oh
like.
yeah, oh yeah. So that's when I started waking up as this was happening.
Mhm,
I started noticing like little by little, especially like on college campuses. You
mhm,
started noticing like, man, like the things that the left once stood for, they're pretty much like given that function now to the right. Like for example, like free speech on
mhm,
college campuses, it almost appears like if it doesn't exist because on certain campuses, this is not true nationwide, but like in University of California, it was like the time where I was seeing like all these like protests were going on when like a speaker like Ben Shapiro would come through and
mhm,
there would be like riots and stuff. I thought that that was insane. Like I did
mhm,
not want to align myself with a group of people that wanted to restrict the First Amendment rights of another American.
mhm.
I thought that that was insane. I mean, like, how did we go from the '90s where the Democrats really owned free speech?
Right.
They pushed like the hip hop, to pretty much
Explicit
be able
lyrics
to
and things like
express
that.
themselves.
Yes.
F the
Yeah.
police, whatever they want
Mhm.
to say, you say it. And the Republicans were like largely against that.
Yeah.
Now, fast forward, it's like the Republicans nowadays, they own free speech, and the Democrats want nothing to do with it.
Right.
To them, words are violence. Not to them, all of them, but that's like the that's like
That's the overwhelming message that I think is
right,
coming from the left, though, and it's just like, well, yeah, you don't want to speak in generalities, but it's just like, hey, man, this is the message that I'm hearing
right.
from, and generally speaking,
Mm,
from the left. And then I think that's true, because I know, like, for me growing up, the boogeyman was the Christian right. Like, they're the ones that are going to try and squash all the fun. They have movies like Footloose. It's like, hey, we're not going to want you to dance. You bring up the '90s and rap. It's like, you had all these Christian moms coming out and
mm,
speaking up against, the explicit lyrics, and that's why they have the explicit lyrics, message on there.
mm,
And now, it is funny, because now it's like the right, even, I don't know if it's the Christian right, but now it's like, hey, like, say what you want to say. Maybe we'll call it the degeneracy of music. But yeah, I don't know, maybe that's just my opinion, like, but you can say what you want to say, and I think
right.
that has become a trait of, the right.
Yeah, and I think that what really like started that, like what really gave that function to the right was the left attacking the right for speech.
Hmm.
Because the right previously, like they were not known for that. Like this was like a liberal value, to be
Hmm.
able to express yourself whatever way that you please. But when the left started attacking the right over literally speech, that's really what gave way to the rise of the pro First Amendment Republicans
Hmm.
that we see today. So I feel like the Republicans were kind of like pushed into a little corner, and now like I feel like they now understand, like, yes, free speech is very important, and
Hmm.
the Democrats are realizing like, no, this is destructive to our message.
Hmm.
Because if anybody can just, especially now with social media, if anybody can just have a huge following and say something that is totally contrary to maybe the politics of the far left, which is usually the case. For
Hmm.
example, individualism. This is a liberal concept, but individualism is frowned upon now on what's brewing on the left, on the
Hmm.
far left. You know what I mean? They see
Right.
things more collective. Everything's about your skin color or
Right.
your socioeconomic status, but never about the individual anymore. So it's interesting, man. It's interesting to see things morph.
Let me ask, being that we're quote unquote people of color, I don't really like the term, but
Yeah.
You know, do you consider yourself Latino, Hispanic? I don't even know, because like I was born here, but like, you know, my parents are Mexican, so I don't know. Am
Right.
I Latino,
I
Hispanic?
consider myself Latino, like, and I would consider you Latino because that's more of you know, there's always that debate over like Latino versus Hispanic,
Mm,
and I feel like in Latin America, not everybody is technically Hispanic because to be Hispanic, you have to be of Spain. But we have people that have pure African genes in Latin America. We have indigenous people in Latin America who don't necessarily have Spanish blood or even
mm,
want to identify with it. You know, so I don't believe that everybody in Latin America is Hispanic, but everybody in Latin America or who have origins in Latin America is Latino, because
mhm,
Latino is literally just like a geographical reference saying
mhm.
that your origins are from, you know, this geographical location, which is Latin America.
Yeah, I like the way you put that, because I was reading somebody. I don't know if you've ever read it. His name is Kevin Williamson. He writes for the National Review quite a bit. He was over at the Atlantic, and then he got booted out because they didn't like his views on abortion. So they
Hmm.
booted him out. But I don't quote exactly that it was him, but I think it was. But he said something to the effect that, like, hey, like, Latino is a Spanish word,
Hmm.
so we're not in a Spanish speaking country, so that's why, you know, Hispanic. But it's not something that I get hung up on. Like, I could really care less.
Right.
I just thought it was interesting. But one thing I am not, for sure, 1,010 toes down, is Latinx.
Oh yeah, me and you both, man. Me and you both. That's the one thing that I'm just not willing to go into like that territory at all, man. Just because of who's pushing it, you know. Like, it's literally my ideological foes who are pushing this on everybody, and they're doing it for the same reason that, you know, they're trying to demonize white people. It's
Uh-huh.
because of this, you know, colonialism. And I get it, man. Like, you know, Spanish, even the Spanish language is, you know, it's like, if you really, you know, go back to the history, it's like you're speaking the language of those who conquered us, you know.
Mhm.
But, you know, it is what it is. I'm speaking English, you know, like
Mhm.
everybody here is speaking English, and that was
Yeah.
also, you know,
Yeah.
that's the same situation. So yeah, I'm just like, yeah, whatever, man. You can't change the past, you know what I mean?
Mhm. I think for me, it's because it's always, you know, maybe I kind of grew up the same way as you. I had, you know, in California, I had friends of all races,
Hmm.
and, you know, people will say, "Oh, you don't see color." It's like, of course I see color, stupid. I just don't care.
Right.
Like, because it's
Right.
like, uh, you know, whoever was my friend was somebody that I liked or got along with.
Hmm.
Uh, if they weren't, then it was somebody who I didn't like me, or didn't get along with. It was never an issue of, oh, this dude is black, or this dude is Mexican, or, you know, whatever. It was like, hey, these are cool people that I like being around.
Hmm.
You know, we have the same. You know, sports was huge for me, so it was like, hey, we're all, you know, playing sports, so we're doing sports related things. So yeah, like, you know, we're trying to win games, or we're trying to do, you
Hmm.
know, whatever. So it was never a thing for me. But I do remember that I did identify a lot with my ethnicity up in, like, through. So I graduated from high school, and I went to college, and then I left, got married, and then came back after and finished school. So I kind of had a truncated college experience.
Hmm.
I didn't have what you would have considered like the traditional college experience.
Hmm.
Um, but I did have a libertarian teacher. I had never heard the term before, and I had a teacher, and we were talking about race for some reason, and, you know, probably a big no now. But I remember there was another Hispanic kid that was really, or Latino kid, who was really smart, real smart dude. He was like, oh, this guy was trying to go to Stanford, and he was really, and we were talking about, like, you can tell that I'm, like, how can you not tell that I'm, you know, Latino or Hispanic or whatever. It's like, you see that on me. And I was like, yeah, like, what's this dude talking about? Like, you can't not see that I'm not white. Like, of course, when I go into a situation, like, people know that I'm not like, you know, the other people around me. And I really held on to that for a long time. But I think it wasn't until I embraced my faith more that it was like, oh, okay, I've been holding on to this thing, and maybe because I've been holding on to my ethnicity. So that's what I identified myself with more than anything. Not even I don't even know if I identified as like an American, because I know like after 9/11 there was like this surge of patriotism, but
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel like, oh, they attacked my country, I'm gonna go fight.
Right, right.
I didn't feel that. In retrospect, that's something that I kind of like, hey, if I was just a young knucklehead, so I didn't understand what this country meant. But
Right.
now, as I identified more with my faith and realizing that in America you had people coming from all these walks of life who can come here and be a part of this and be American, that's when it was like, oh yeah, I think I've held on to my ethnicity more. And I don't know if that's a thing where it's like, because we came from somewhere else, that there is a part of you that's like, I go home or I go back to El Salvador, or I go back to Mexico, and they know I'm not from there,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'm here in the States and they know that, hey, like, I'm no relative of George Washington. Like, so there's just kind of like, I'm in a no man's land. So it's like, what do you identify with? I don't know if that's something that you ever did. I think
Oh,
I
yeah.
know I did for a while.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially with the politics in this country, man, it's like they really make Latinos feel like we're not supposed to be here. You know what I mean? That's the way that I used to see it,
Mm-hmm.
whenever immigration debates would come up, because it's
Mm-hmm.
always centered around Latinos. Even though there's many other immigrants that come here even
Mm-hmm.
illegally, but the one that is like the main contender in the immigration debate is the people who are coming into the southern border, which are
Mm-hmm.
Latinos. And I felt exactly how you felt, man. I went to El Salvador, and the people are clearly different from me. Like, even
Mm-hmm.
the way that they were raised, like
Mm-hmm.
these little kids that are like 10 years old and they're already like working a full-time
Mm-hmm.
job.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, yo, these kids are mature, man. Like the kids back in the States are totally different.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I had my daughter with me one year that I went to El Salvador, and my daughter, I think when she went, she was 2. And there was a little girl her age. It was literally her age. It was like sweeping up the restaurant. I was like, what? I told my daughter, I was like, yo, you got it so good, man.
Yeah, you have no clue.
Yeah, but it's crazy, man, because I came back here, and man, especially after that month-long visit, because my first time to El Salvador, I was there for a month, and that
Mm-hmm.
was a huge shock. So when I came back, I was like kissing the ground, man. I
Mm-hmm.
was like, good old America, man, because it's a whole different environment, man. Like,
Mm-hmm.
here we do have something good, we do have something to be proud of, but just like you, I never really felt like, like, all right, this is like something I'm very patriotic about, because I
Mm-hmm.
felt like, especially because the way that my family came was illegally. I felt like I was just always made to feel like we weren't never supposed to come here. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of hard to kind of attach yourself to a land like balls deep. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And when you feel like the land is not very like happy that you're there. Like I would talk to people online, and I'm an American citizen. I was born here,
Mm-hmm.
but like they'll tell me like, oh, you should have never been an American citizen.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason why you are is because of the law that if you're born on U.S. soil, you're an
Mm-hmm.
American citizen, the
Mm-hmm.
birthright. So I'm just like, damn, yo, like that's a little like hit in the gut right there. It's like you're denying my whole existence when like this is the only country that I identify with.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So it was definitely a struggle, man. At first, and just figuring out what my identity is. I'm pretty much past all that stuff now. Like now, I use that as part of my platform. Like as a libertarian, I do want like better laws for Latinos, because I believe that we have a big I hate saying entitlement, because I don't believe anybody's entitled to anything, but I feel like this is the continent that our ancestors are from. Maybe not our Spanish side, but the Spaniards came and conquered the people that were here,
Mm-hmm.
and as a result, what we have are Latinos, indigenous people mixed with Spaniard blood, and some mixed with African blood in addition to that. So I feel like this is like the side of the world that we're from, that and people come here and they've been crossing this border for centuries. You know what I mean? All of Texas and Arizona and California, all that was inhabited by Mexico. Like all the people who are in, like from the geographical area of Mexico, like that extended all the way into what is modern day United States. So the way that I feel by drawing those, arbitrary lines, and I understand like the whole war and like we lost that territory, blah blah blah. I understand all of that, but I just feel like we can be doing a lot better, man. Especially for people who are native to this continent. I don't think that it should be as stringent as it is. I understand we need border security.
Mm-hmm.
Is the American people, is the American people's country, they feel like the borders are vulnerable, and perhaps they are. We're living in a totally different age from just 100 years ago. Yeah, you have to take into consideration the qualms of everyone, when you're part of a country. It's not all about, I'm not saying that it should be all about Latinos when it comes to immigration, but I think that we should have a little bit more of a say as to how things are handled.
Yeah, and this is one of the conversations that I did want to have with you, because I in Twitter, you are limited in characters, and
Right.
there is a lack of nuance, and so I like, for me, people would be like, oh, you like I'm for borders, but I wanted to kind of understand your thought process, because for me it's an issue of sovereignty.
Mm-hmm.
It's the people, the citizens of the country get to decide who gets to come in. And it might not be a perfect analogy, but I can't think of anything else. It's like, in my house, I get to decide who gets to come in.
Right.
And if there's someone outside my house who is not as well off as I am, doesn't mean that I have to feed them or to open up my doors to them. If I do that, it's an act of charity that I can take on my own. But I do get to know who is coming in, for what reasons. And so I kind of want, it sounds like you understand that, but in Twitter, that doesn't always come across. So that's why I was like, one of the reasons, you're very, very thoughtful in a lot of the things that you say on Twitter. And so I wanted to kind of give you the space to kind of, can we speak on that a little bit more? Because it does sound like you are for borders, but I'm not sure, how open, because so could you explain a little bit more, David?
Yeah, absolutely. So the approach that I take, because like you're right, you have to listen to the people, you know what I mean? Because it is everyone's country. So the approach that I take is I look at the arguments against it. I look at the arguments against people coming into this country. And one of the most legitimate arguments out there is we are a welfare state. And people are coming here and they're tapping into welfare that they haven't paid into, and they're pretty much just going to overload the system, and it's not fair to the people who are paying into it.
Mm-hmm.
And I totally understand that. So for people who say that we should have closed borders until we end the welfare state, it's a totally valid thing to say, but from a liberty standpoint, I try to approach this situation putting liberty ahead of the state instead of putting the state ahead of liberty, because the biggest obstacle right here is the welfare state. So I also don't want that, man. I don't want Latinos coming here just to mooch off the system.
Mm-hmm.
That's a bad look for Latinos, for one
Mm-hmm.
thing. And then on top of that, it just creates a lot of politicization of Latinos.
Mm-hmm.
Now like we become a contentious issue where the Democrats and Republicans are fighting over us, and I'm just like, damn, like we just really want to exist, man. At the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day, we don't really want to be so politicized, as a people. So the approach that I take is that, okay, so the welfare state is the biggest obstacle to letting people come here. But we have to consider the current facts. Our current immigration system has not stopped pretty much a large chunk of illegal immigration. We have, the low estimate is that we have 11 million people undocumented in this country. That's a lot of people that we don't know who they are. They're undocumented. And I think that that's crazy. I think that we can be in a much better situation where we do know all of those 11 people, and that they do all have a tax ID, and that they are all formally paying taxes when they go to work. There is no reason why we should have all these people living under the table. And this is, this doesn't sound very libertarian, because libertarians are like, oh no, I want whoever doesn't have to pay taxes shouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I'm like, you're circumventing the nation's laws. to begin with. So you have strikes against you.
Mm-hmm.
You have people who can legitimately say you broke the law and you need to get out. So if you want to stay, I believe that there has to be concessions on both sides of the argument. So if you are here in this country illegally, what's the better scenario, where we have currently 11 million people that we don't know who they are, or we know exactly who all of them are and they're all paying taxes?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, okay, so we should start off with that basic premise, is that our current system is pretty much a failure,
Mm-hmm.
our immigration controls. So I'm like, the welfare state is the biggest obstacle. So why don't we make these people who come here over the border, if like we can even keep the process that we have in place, but the people who come here over the border illegally, they should be subject to different rules, and one of them should be making them completely ineligible for welfare.
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest ways that they even get welfare is that they come here and they have a baby here, and the
Mm-hmm.
the baby is an American citizen.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, as nice as it sounds, I don't think that that's a sustainable model. I don't think that if you have a baby here that it should just render citizenship,
Mm-hmm.
especially if they're using that citizenship to make the entire family eligible for welfare,
Mm-hmm.
when they haven't paid into it. This is why there's a lot of strife between some Americans and Hispanics, is
Mm-hmm.
because they're seeing like a whole invasion of people coming in and leeching off the system. So I'm just trying to propose a way to pretty much let the Latinos come here and work without ever having the right to vote, because they came here illegally, without ever having them the right to vote, and without them becoming citizens, like no type of amnesty until like a certain amount of time of actually paying taxes in this country.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm all about solutions of how to increase the most amount of liberty for the most amount of people,
Mm-hmm.
where it's not infringing on someone else's liberty, is not infringing on someone else's taxes that they pay, and other people are draining from. I want pragmatic solutions.
Mm-hmm.
At first, initially, I was coming off as like an ideologue, where like if you talk to me, it's like talking to any libertarian. Like if they're an ideologue, like exactly what I'm gonna say, that person's gonna say.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm
Yeah.
just like, man, just that alone kind of rids me of my individuality, because
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't really say like what I'm willing to accept. And
Mm-hmm.
so what I'm willing to accept for immigration controls is a totally different system from what we have now. Something where we go back to the Ellis Island approach, where we have like, quote unquote Ellis Islands along the southern border.
Mm-hmm.
And these are the legal way for people to come in, where that's where they're gonna, if there's any way to link our systems with the government systems of the countries they came from,
Mm-hmm.
we can see who is a fugitive, who is running from the law, who has any type of disease. If we can test them at the border, whatever the case is, whatever parameters we want to set, reject all the people who are going to do harm to our country.
Yeah.
Reject the child sex traffickers. Pretty much at those checkpoints, that is where you make that determination, and then everyone else is issued a tax ID number to start working. But it doesn't come with citizenship. It doesn't come with voting rights. It literally is giving them what they came here for, which is just a shot at opportunity.
Yeah. Which is understandable, right? Like, you want the shot at opportunities, but I think, because I don't think it was a big deal, pre 1960, because I think that's when the welfare state was created, right, in the
Right.
60s.
Right.
So back then there was like, if you came here, then yeah, you're gonna have to work. There's no I guess there's poor incentives for coming over now, or you're incentivizing the wrong things now, so you're attracting people who would want to take advantage of those incentives. So there is poor incentives. I think that's a great point that you make about that. I think though is just a concern with just the abuse of the system, right? Like, you can come here and say you can't vote, but like in California you can get driver's licenses, and who knows, usually when you go in California, when you go to the DMV, that's usually where you register to vote. And so who is now going to check that? Because something like voting is much larger than, we'll say, like doing like background checks, where there's been people who have gotten in possession of firearms, which is a smaller pool of people than who would register to vote, and there's cracks in that system. So I think the big thing probably would be the welfare state, but I don't that's a big monster now that's been let in, and so now it's like, okay, how are we not just kind of coming to my mind though. I think education is huge. Like one of the big kind of silver linings of this coronavirus stuff is that there is now a huge surge in homeschooling, where now parents might take a look at being involved in what their kids are learning and having these kind of liberty conversations. I don't think that we got to this point where gun rights are infringed on and everything is taxed. If you want to build an addition on your home, that you have to go ask permission, like you don't really own anything.
Right.
We didn't get here in a day, and so I don't think we'll get out of this in a day. And so that's what I think I'm encouraged. I'm a more of an optimistic person by nature. I think I think it's good, and I think that that's the only way to live, right? Like, what's the point if you're not dreading the next day or whatever? So right. I think that's a silver lining. But going back to just the immigration, because I think I coached in a public school. It was an inner city school, and it was just like one of the teachers was in there, and he was like, yeah, I got 4 different languages being spoken in the classroom. He's like, you had people speaking Spanish, English, and then it was like, I think we had some like refugees from like Ethiopia, Uganda, and like Farsi, some other languages. And it's like, how am I supposed to teach to these concepts in a social sciences class when there's no common language that we can even speak? And it's like, yeah, the citizens that live there, they're paying the price with a poor education. But I think that's why having charter school systems. Do you guys have charter schools there where you're at? Is that pretty robust?
I don't know about Maryland. In Philadelphia, there are charter schools.
Is that where your daughter's at now?
No, my so I have like a weird situation. My daughter is 4, so in
she's not even in school anyway. Okay.
In schooling right now. But yeah, in Philadelphia, they have charter schools. But the public schools and the charter schools, there are not good schools.
Oh, really?
My stepdaughter, excuse me, my stepdaughter, she's about to turn 9 years old. She's my stepdaughter, so she's actually like between homes, between here and her biological dad. So she's going to school in New Jersey. But for when we lived in Philadelphia, she was going to school in Philly, and man, it was horrendous. And she was just there for kindergarten, because I thought, it's just kindergarten. How bad can it be? You learn your ABCs, whatever. It was atrocious, man. Like, it's just like one teacher with like 35 students. These students are like just out of control. A lot of them are just abused kids. They do a lot of inappropriate things. And they speak in a way where I'm just like, yo, like my daughter was coming home talking some crazy stuff. I'm just like, yo, like this is just crazy. Like I just saw big change in her personality just going to this public school. And I was just like, wow, it's a shame. And so we started looking into charter schools, and it's like lottery based in Philadelphia. And it's like when it opens up for like registration, so many people apply. Like you have literally a very small chance of getting into a charter school.
Yeah.
So I just automatically saw that it's just like a very broken system, man. And that's one thing where I give credit to Trump, man, that he's pushing for school choice. I think it's very, very important in this country. And it even, addresses the issues that you were mentioning with the different languages. If we stop funding public education institutions and start funding the students instead, I think that it is going to open up the market for just a whole like variety of different types of schooling instead of putting everybody into one box.
Yeah.
I don't know if you follow Corey DeAngelis.
Yes. Yeah.
Dude is he dedicates himself to education.
Right.
So, and I love people like that who like they specialize in one thing because they're devoting all of their knowledge to it, and he has accolades to his name. So when I hear his ideas, I'm just like, man, that's not the libertarian solution, But like you said, we didn't get here in a day. We're not going to get out of here in a day.
Mhm.
That's kind of what changed my mentality of going from an ideologue to more of like a pragmatist. I want to do what's pragmatic and what's putting us in the right direction, as opposed to keep going further and further into what's wrong. So the idea of school choice, where we fund the students as opposed to the educational institution, I'm like, man, that opens up so many possibilities for kids, because now they're not confined to a horrible public education system just determined by their zip code. I mean, that's a very classist thing to begin with, because there are neighborhoods where like the public schools are great. Even in New Jersey, where I grew up, it wasn't the best public school, but it was much better than Philadelphia. That's for
Yeah.
sure. So it's like when it's tied to your zip code, I just feel like it's very unjust to determine that way, like what school a child is going to go to. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and even then, like we have A-rated schools here in the district where I'm at, and
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I'm not going to put my kid into to public school, just from just like a basic mission statement. So the schools are A-rated, right? And when you think about it, it's like, well, what did you do to get that grade? All that aside, like the mission statement of the school was college and career ready, and I'm like, what? Where is that leading my kid? If
Mm-hmm.
that is the aim of their education, to go to college and to get a career. I'm a W-2 guy. I know what it's like to work a 9 to 5.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not. I don't want that for my kids.
Right.
If they do it on their choice, like they made the choice. For me, it was just kind of like, you go to college, you get a job and you work.
Mm-hmm.
The charter school was a trivium school, and their mission was seeking truth, goodness, and beauty. And I'm like, wow, that's a whole different. They're playing a whole different ball game.
Right.
And on top of that, they talked about the virtues, which was like friendship, courage. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
wow, like they're really trying to build these kids up. And there was, I don't know if there was, and they, you get kids of all kinds. Like kids come in, so they're kind of from all over. And I would say like we're middle upper class in the area where we're at.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, like the families were very involved. Like I remember we had a father-daughter dance,
Mm-hmm.
and I went, and it was like jam packed
Yeah.
with dads with their daughters. And I remember my daughter and I, we were dancing and stuff, and I was like, oh, I want to take pictures. And then I was like, well, let's hang out, mama. Let's get some snacks and we'll dance a little bit, and the line will go down. The line didn't go down. And so I was like, I was basically spent the whole dance waiting in line for
Mm-hmm.
it to go down. But I was like, wow, this is really cool, because all these parents are involved. But
Mm-hmm.
then, like, in talking to the other dads, I ran into a dad who was my daughter's teacher, and it was like, oh, the teachers who have kids bring their kids here too.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, that's
Wow.
something I didn't think about.
Right.
And so, yeah, like I'm all about the teacher. I'm all
Yeah.
about the teacher. Who's my kid with? Because even if it is an A-rated school or a highly rated, it's like it doesn't really mean a lot. Because we had kids that were in Montessori schools, and then the teacher left and retired. So I went to another Montessori school, and it's like this didn't work at all. It's like, oh, it's all about the teacher. That's who I care about. So that's why I think funding the student is the way to go, because every kid is different. Every
Right.
school is different. Every class is different from classroom to classroom, even in a great school. So,
Yeah.
yeah, Corey DeAngelis' money. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, yeah, and funding the student just opens the door to like many different educational scenarios. Like you have the if every student has a voucher that's being issued to them. Like just say for an example, like Corey DeAngelis, he says that we spend on average nationwide $15,000 per student per year. So what if those students got that $15,000 per year in the form of a voucher to go and take to an educational facility. That allows you to either, that for one thing, that encourages like churches and synagogues and mosques. It encouraged them to start their own school, because now all of their congregants' children have, a $15,000, voucher to use. So that encourages the religious institutions to create schools, which I think it's very important, because especially like in Christian households, like this is a Christian nation, that is and oftentimes that is the sense of community. That's where they're getting their sense of community, in the churches. And for me, it just makes so much sense for the education to go right alongside with that, like for the same church to also be the school, for the children who go there. I see that with synagogues, because as you know, I have a Jewish background, and let me tell you, man, these synagogues, they are very well funded, and it's all through private donation, and their schools are immaculate. Like these people are breeding like scientists and doctors, and it's just amazing the strong community that I see within the Jewish community, and I feel like that can be the same case for all of Christian. I know that does exist in Christianity as well, but widespread where every church would also have a school attached to them. I think that would create just a huge sense of community between society, church, and government, because you're not really being spoon fed all this information from the Department of Education. Now it's like you are actually just being ingrained in your community. You have a strong support system. You have everything's pretty much for you to compete, and you have something to fall back on, some type of structure to fall back on. And I feel like that's what society is largely missing nowadays. So in school choice, you can get that type of scenario. You can do the scenario of micro schooling. I don't know if you're familiar.
Yeah, I've heard of that. Yeah,
amazing. I think that's like a $1 billion idea. Where you're just like pooling your money with like-minded parents, and you guys, hire a teacher, and bam, that teacher could just be, they could have just a class of 10 children. And if they're getting $15,000 each child, there's $150,000 where the teacher has their money for supplies, to separate a part of their home, or if they want to rent a spot, for the schooling of your children. And, and they're paid way more than they would be by the public schools, and they have children.
Right, and that was what I was going to say too. It's like that takes care of the hey, teachers aren't getting paid argument. Now you have, hey, here's a market. You're out in the open market. You can put yourself out there, and people will pay for your service. And I have a teacher that my kids have all gone to, and it's like all my kids are going to her, and she could charge way more, but it's like she charged what she charged, like done, like because awesome. she's that good. We're homeschooling our kids now. We pulled them out, and the 15,000 is way more than we would need. I think we probably spent maybe like, because we're buying everything now, because it was like, okay, now you could see like this is the office / classroom. I don't know if you could tell back there was like the kids' paintings and stuff, but I mean, we might have spent like $1,000 or $2,000, like we had to buy the desks and stuff, but the curriculum was like, oh, okay, like that's where a lot of the money was spent. But we spent a few $100s, and my wife is doing the teaching, but if we're talking about like, because property taxes have gone up, it's like every so often it's like, hey, we need more money, and my property, like we don't pay a lot here in Arizona, but still, it's like I'd rather not have to pay that money. I don't know how it is in Philly if you get hammered on property taxes, but I prefer not to. And if we could, save everybody more money in everybody's pocket, I think that makes the individual stronger if they're keeping their money.
Yep, absolutely. No, and in Philly, the property taxes are not terrible. They might be terrible compared to Arizona.
Maybe.
I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
Anywhere from like $2,000 to $3,000 a year.
There? Mm-hmm. Oh, it's comparable then. That's comparable. Okay. Yeah.
So that's like fairly low for this area, because like in New Jersey, it's insane. Like norm is probably, the average is, I would say, probably like about $6,000 or $7,000 a year. And then where I live now, forget about it, man. I would never buy a house here. I think anybody who does is a fool.
Oh, it's way more than that. Oh, in Maryland, that's
Yeah,
right. Yeah,
Maryland.
right. Yeah.
I don't even understand how people survive out here, because the houses, like, to begin with, like the real estate is, it's through the roof. For a small house, like a little rancher, you're paying like $600K, and then on top of that, your taxes are like $8,000 or $9,000 a year. I'm like,
Yeah.
how are these people
Yeah.
surviving?
Yeah,
Man? Like,
that's more than a car payment. Like I read somewhere that in New Jersey that it was like, yeah, somebody's, dad bought a house in the 60s for like 40, $50,000,
Mhm.
and then now it's like, early 2010s or something like that. And it's like he's got to move. It's like
Right.
his house is paid off, but he has to move. It's like, why does he have to move? It's like, well, his taxes are like, $17,000 a year, so he can't afford the taxes. So he has to sell his house because like they didn't want to leave, but it was just like the taxes were just too much. And it's
That's
just like
crazy.
that's a tragedy. It's like, well, they didn't want to leave. It's like you did the right thing, right? You paid off your house, but it's like, nah, give me my money, son.
Right.
Like,
Yeah, like really never truly paid off,
yeah,
man.
it's never really paid off.
That's so discouraging. And
So,
man, that's where, like on my page, I don't know if you noticed, but you don't really see me say taxation is theft. But I do believe that taxation
mhm.
is theft. And man, in that situation that you just gave, taxation is theft,
Yeah,
man.
they got robbed. Yeah, that's true.
Come on, man. $17,000 a
Uh,
year. That is insane.
yeah, I don't know if it's quite that, but it was enough where it was like they needed to move because
Right.
it was just too much. Going back to so do you consider yourself Jewish or Christian and Jewish?
My background, like my cultural background is Jewish, which is
Uh,
odd because, like I'm Hispanic.
uh,
But yeah, man, like my grandma, like back in El Salvador, this is like, my grandma, she was born in the late 20s and she's still alive. She's in her 90s right now.
nice. Holla
Um,
at grandma,
yeah. Yeah.
abuela. Nigga for you.
She was actually the one that kind of like turned everything around for my family, because she was in the Catholic Church. That's how she was raised.
Hmm.
But she just had her own little moment where she was just questioning certain things
Hmm.
in the Bible, and she just took a whole different direction and went the Jewish route, and literally it just from there continued. This is like back in the 50s and 60s that she did that, and from then on, that's just been like that's how she raised my dad, and my
Oh,
dad is
really? Okay.
yeah. So that my dad is the one that sets the religious tone in the house. Like
Hmm.
my mom didn't have like a Jewish background growing up, or even a religious one at all. Like she
Hmm.
was just, she just didn't. She was like not religious at all.
Hmm.
So it's my dad that kind of like set that tone in the house, and my whole family, like all of the Jewish holidays. That is my cultural background. I've never like well, I did celebrate Christmas before, uh,
Hmm.
but it was like that was through my mom's family because they were big on that. Um,
Hmm.
and my dad never like prohibited me. He always gave me the choice. You can celebrate Christmas or you cannot celebrate it.
Hmm.
And I would celebrate it all the way up to until like age 12. Age 12 is when I made the decision to not celebrate it, because what was the bigger influence in my life was Judaism.
Hmm.
So it's the Jewish holidays that are actually my cultural
Hmm.
holidays. And I say that because I wouldn't consider myself really observant. Like if you see my parents, they are observant,
Hmm.
and my family pretty much is observant. But me, I kind of strayed off the path of Judaism. I'm not really big on religion, but I do have my preferences as to like what religions are good and which are bad.
Hmm.
Because I don't believe all religions
Well,
are.
that's interesting because I know I had seen one time. I don't know if you were celebrating Hanukkah or if it was Passover or something, and I was like, I saw that and I was like, oh, like, that's something you don't really see Latinos
Mhm.
do, and so I was like, oh, I think that might have been like, I think I might have found you. I don't know how I found you, uh, but I saw like you were with Zuby one time and you met up with Zuby, and I was like, oh, that's cool. He's over here with Zuby, and so I was like, I started, following you, but I saw that and I was like, oh, that's interesting. That's not well, just the libertarian liberty stuff was
Right.
one thing, and then it was like you threw that in there, and I was like, oh, this dude's really interesting. Let me hit this follow button. This dude,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
let me hit, because like for me, so I was raised Christian, so my grandpa was kind of the one that kind of changed that for us.
Hmm.
Um, I wouldn't say that. I don't say that I'm Jewish. I'm not, but I would say that I'm Torah observant for the most part. So I'm learning these things because the revelation came to me that Jesus was a Jew.
Mm-hmm.
And you hear that and it's just like, well, yeah, he's a Jew. It's like, no, he was a Jew like before all, the Last Supper, he was doing Passover.
Right.
And it's like, oh, he was doing Passover. And
Mm-hmm.
so like in Christianity, we're Holy Spirit led. And so like I felt like you could go too far and go into these other things, but it was like, well, you got to know your roots first. And so for me, that's where it was a lot of things in my faith started to make sense. And it was like, Jesus came and he did all of these things. And
Mm-hmm.
so if I'm going to be like Jesus, well, he did those things, so I
Right.
should do those things. So it was like, we gave up pork, and like we just did Rosh Hashanah. Like I don't really know all the things because it was like, this is all new to me. But for
Right.
me, it's just like the whole Bible is true. Like people be like, "Oh, you're a weirdo." Like, well, that's what I'm betting my soul on. So I can't pick and choose what I want. Do I live them all out?
Right.
No, but I believe in them, and I think that's where a lot of my patriotism started coming in, because it was like, I'm not Jewish, right? Like I didn't do any of those things. Like those weren't my stories, Moses, David, those weren't my stories. But then it was this idea of being grafted in, and it's like, oh yeah, I can come from like this separate piece and be grafted, like a plant can be grafted in, and you can be a part of now the whole roots. Like it's all yours.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something that I very much connected with my patriotism. Is like, America is the one place, because if I was to go back to Mexico, I would still not be a quote unquote like real Mexican.
Right.
And
Right.
so like if I go to Spain, I'm not Spanish. I'm a Mexican or American in Spain. But America is the one place where you can come to, whether you're from China or from El Salvador or Israel, whatever, and you can be an American.
Right.
And
Right.
so that very much, I feel like it lined up. And it was like in the Bible, it was like the whole Moses story in liberty. And
Mm-hmm.
then on the Liberty Bell, it has the Bible verse, proclaim liberty. It's like, oh, this is where all this comes from. This is why this is such a different place than anywhere else in the world.
Right.
And, obviously we're not perfect, blah, 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 blah. But this is the one place that has attempted that. And that's why it's like, oh, I'm
Right.
very much a proud American now.
Yeah.
Now
No.
that I'm older.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I can definitely like I can definitely I'm with you on that, man. It's no secret amongst Jewish circles. Jesus is not a popular character. Like there was a whole thing with Ben Shapiro that came out recently that he was like criticizing Jesus because he said like I think that like Mel Gibson is making like a sequel to
Passion of the Christ. Yeah.
So Ben Shapiro's like, he titled it like Jesus is not going to get crossed again or something stupid.
Yeah, something. Yeah.
It definitely was. It could have been interpreted as insensitive. I don't think it was, but like you already know, like Judaism, they don't accept Jesus, not even as a prophet. But that's where I break from religiosity really, because I don't look at things through that lens anymore. Because I once did, man, and I once used to say really screwed up things, man. That where just when I look back on it, it was just like a total immaturity that religion instills in people. Because now when I look at the stories of Jesus, and especially the fact, given his historical background that he's Jewish, I'm just like, this dude is awesome. Like what? Why is everybody hating on him? Like, he kept the feast, he kept the Sabbath. He was circumcised on the 8th day. You know what I mean? Like, and everything that he said is like what I was taught in Judaism. Like in Judaism, when you get to like the more mystical sides of it, they're like the deeper teachings like of the Hebrew letters and everything. It is all about everything that Jesus preaches, man. Like he said, it pretty much is like the idea is that you're dying to your flesh and you're being reborn in your spirit. It's like you're denying your ego, you're denying your body, and now you're living by your spirit as opposed to just living according to the whims of your flesh. And that's the way that Jesus frames everything. And he says that you have to be a light unto the world, and not to let your light be covered. Always let it shine. I'm like, yo, these are all concepts that I learned in Judaism. So when I see Jesus, I'm like, man, like honestly, and I'm not saying this just because you're Christian. I'm just like, man, like historically, like Jesus is one of my favorite characters, man. And
Hmm.
not to make him sound like an ordinary man,
Hmm.
I'm just saying, like I
No,
really
I know what you mean.
enjoy the stories. And you know, so I when I sometimes when I talk about Jesus on my page, I I I come off very like I'm trying to attack. But I have actually done a lot of studies into that, and that's why I feel comfortable speaking out on the views that I do about Jesus. Because even though Jews don't accept them, I just feel like there's so much overlap, and what's blinding everybody really is just religiosity, man.
Hmm.
It's what's keeping people apart. And maybe it's by design, you know. Maybe there's a greater plan at hand, but to be criticizing Jesus or putting him down, I feel like that in Judaism they call that lashon hara. That's the evil tongue. You know, it's
Hmm.
like you're speaking against somebody, and it's really not something that would be pleasing to a God. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So yeah, my relationship with that whole topic, like I'm just much more open now that I've kind of like ditched just the religious confines. You know, like they try to set rules and they kind of put you in the box. Like in Judaism, it's all about what the rabbis say. You know, and if the rabbis don't like Jesus, then you can't like Jesus.
Hmm.
And I'm just like, that's just not how I'm built, man. Like
Right.
my parents accept that type of thinking, and I'm just like, man, I don't see existence that way. I don't believe that we can just put everything into a box that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think in Christianity there's definitely the same. It was the same thing, going towards Jews, and I had never really thought about it. Like being on the West Coast, I don't know if it's different on the East Coast where there's a much larger contingent. Like I didn't if I knew Jews, I didn't know that they were Jewish. It was never a thing. But like we had a pastor come in and it was a pastor from Texas, and it was like he was telling us like, look at this all the stuff that it's pointed to here in the New Testament was talked about and mirrored in the Torah or the Old Testament, but I didn't even know what the Torah was, so it was just the Old Testament, but it was just like, okay, it was all in the Torah. And
Right.
I think as I kind of learned more, I think that also shaped my political views, because being in college and stuff like that, it was like, hey, let people do what they want to do. But then as I got older, it's like, wait, yeah, I'm not cool with drug use, like the loosening of the marijuana laws at the time, things like that. Um, but I heard a pastor talk about like, hey, uh, if you want to have a Peter, who's the one who spread all the gospel, you might have a Judas, which is who betrayed him. So it's
Mhm.
like Jesus knew that he was going to be betrayed, but he still gave him the ability to make his own choices. Oh, and I did want to talk about, even in the Garden of Eden, the tree of knowledge was put there. The
Mhm.
temptation, like if we were to be made as robots, or to not to be able to do things, then why did God put the tree of knowledge there? Because for you to be able to do good, there has to be the potential for evil. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but it was there. And
Mhm.
so when we're dealing with our laws, it's like, how far do we want to go? And so I wanted to kind of speak with you on that.
Yeah, yeah. So like one of the things that I love about the Torah is that, you know, back in those times in ancient Israel, you know, they were pretty much a theocracy, and the Torah was the law of the land. But like now that we're not in ancient Israel, when I read the Torah, I start noticing like things that really align with my beliefs personally. Like obviously, I don't believe in stoning anybody for homosexuality or anything like that. But like I see in the Torah, it says God is saying, "I present before you life and death. Choose life." He's
Mm-hmm.
literally telling you you have the option to choose. Choose life. You know, he's letting you know this is the way to go, and that I believe is the approach that we need to take with government. I have a Christian cousin, and we talk about this all the time. We go for hours on this topic, man. And that's the way that I believe that a relationship with God is an individual relationship. So um, us, like say, like as believers. if we were to legislate our beliefs on the people, we're kind of taking away that choice from the people. And I feel like that causes more harm than good, only because we're in a democracy where the pendulum of power swings back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
So now we see like these Democrats, they pursue Christians. I see what was his name, Beto O'Rourke. He
Mm-hmm.
says that if a religious institution, whether it's a church or anything, doesn't perform a homosexual marriage, we should revoke their
Mm-hmm.
tax exempt status.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's a scary, scary road to go down, man, because that is literally priming the whole arena for persecution
Mm-hmm.
via the law. And I believe that is just not the way to go, man. And that type of thing happens when we try to use the government to legislate morality. You know what I mean? So I believe that's why this kind of solidifies my libertarian beliefs, where I believe that if you are a Christian, you should be able to practice your religion 100% to the letter of your religion. So if that includes not performing homosexual marriages or not catering to gay weddings, I think that is your First Amendment rights to do that, to live according to your beliefs. And I believe that in a libertarian society, it is up to the church. If we're talking about Christianity, it is up to the church to spread the good message, as opposed to ruling from the pulpit and doing so. Because I just feel like it's more beneficial, and it gives people the choice, and also it allows a coexistence of beliefs. Because maybe let's say the Bible Belt is not for somebody who has progressive values, but there's a place for them. They can go to California, New Jersey, Portland. There's a place for people who want nothing to do with religious life.
Mm-hmm.
But there is also a home for people who want to openly practice their religion.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe in a libertarian society, that is what we get, because we completely separate religion from politics, and we also we completely separate legislating morality at all from politics. I believe that that's the only way forward. Otherwise, we're going to be legislating against each other back and forth. It's going to be the religious community against non-believers, and non-believers against the religious community.
Is there a line on that morality? Because I mean, obviously we have laws against murder. So is there something more that you're talking about, like the marijuana laws? Is that where you're talking about? Not so much crimes against.
There's overlap between the morality of a religious person and then the general public. Like murder, everyone agrees that's wrong, unless we're talking about abortion.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what people disagree. I'm totally against abortion. But when it comes to murder, in a libertarian society, I'm pretty sure you've heard the non-aggression principle before.
I think so.
Yeah, so if you haven't, the non-aggression principle is pretty much law should be predicated upon aggression. Whereas if you as an individual are not aggressing upon another individual, you're not assaulting them, you're not defrauding them, you're not causing them harm, you're not destroying their property, then you're literally just you're a free person to do whatever you want, as long as you don't deny the rights of the person next to you. That's what the non-aggression principle is predicated on. If there's no victim, then there's no crime. And marijuana laws are a good example of that, because I don't know if you've ever smoked marijuana before, but I have, and I have a lot. And I'm just like, man, and not only that, I've grown it too. I've actually did a whole entire grow before, only once in my life. But it was a very enlightening experience, because I used to see marijuana differently. When I started learning how to grow, I had to go to all of these green thumb pages to learn how to grow this. And now that I know how to grow that, I know how to grow so many other things, because it's literally just a plant. So when I see people being locked up for marijuana in certain states still, I think it's crazy, man. I just know a lot of marijuana smokers, and even in my family, and I'm just like, no, that person definitely doesn't belong in prison next to the rapist and the murderer. You know what I mean? Because they're really not. They're not producing a victim.
Yeah.
They themselves are just getting high.
Yeah. The argument, I guess, would be, I don't know if it's very well known. I did come across it. It was that there was a link between marijuana usage, and I don't know if it was child abuse or just kids who ended up in the foster system. So I don't know if that was a result of them being arrested for that and then ending up in the system for that reason. And so when I came across that, because I was like, hey, like if you want to smoke, like, you have alcohol, so what's marijuana. But I'm very much aware that I've seen that there is very much a slippery slope, and that's the concern for me. It's like, if marijuana is now illegal or legal, then what's to stop the next thing. But that's why I like federalism, because it was like, Colorado can
Mhm.
legalize it, and then you can say like, all right, like you can go do that there, but here in Arizona,
Right.
no. And then let them be the guinea pigs and see what happens there, because I think it's been a good 7 years now, I
Right.
think. So we're kind of you can kind of get and see what's happening. I think that's a good way to go about it. It doesn't mean that everybody needs to go like balls deep and like, hey, let's go all try this together. It's like, hey,
Right.
yeah, let's take a look at that. So I think there's um
Yeah.
it's not something that I'm really concerned with, but I think the non-aggression thing. Like, what about because my idea of the libertarian, it's like, yeah, is this a baby snorting crack with an AK-47? Like, like you get to the ridiculous. It's like how far, like, what is that? What is
Yeah.
that if there is a limiting principle, like, where is it? And obviously aggression
Mhm.
is the non-aggression one is one. It's like, yeah, I think we could all get there, but maybe on some of these other issues, like
Right.
firearms, like I'm pro. The more firearms, like, to me, it's like, okay, this makes sense. So I'm
Right.
there. Is there, like, where is the line drawn though?
I think that we don't have to reinvent the wheel with a libertarian philosophy as it pertains to children. Because I know, trust me, I know that libertarians are a mess, and there are fringe libertarians who will go to the extent of saying that kids doing drugs is okay, and that's, to me, is just morally reprehensible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't, and it doesn't reflect the ideals of the Libertarian Party itself. The Libertarian Party itself is like, they're a bunch of normal people, like they're not these fringe people who are, like, no seatbelts and no drug laws for children, let kids do heroin. Like, they're not those type of people. They're normal people. And there's certainly a line, because children are the most vulnerable people in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree that they should not be doing drugs. They shouldn't be doing marijuana. They shouldn't be smoking cigarettes. None of that. I
Mm-hmm.
believe that all of that stuff should be available to you, though, upon adulthood. If you
Mm-hmm.
are an adult, you should be able to consume pretty much anything. If you can go to be sent to war and go kill people, you should be able to even have a beer when you come back.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
that to me, that's as young, whatever we determine is the age of an adult, which is, it looks like it's going to be 18 forever. I've heard like talks of it going down to like 17, but regardless, using 18, because I mean 18 really is still just a child. But
Mm-hmm.
um, that is where the line would be drawn. Adulthood is what gives you your right to do literally whatever you want, as long as you aren't, as I mentioned, assaulting,
Mm-hmm.
defrauding, or aggressing against property.
How about like prostitution? What are your thoughts on that?
I'm not a fan of prostitution. It's a tough situation, man, because I actually live socially. I live a conservative lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
I still live the way that I was raised, and I was raised in the congregation, and I was raised with conservative values. So when I am a proponent of something not being illegal, I always try to make the distinction to understand that it is not equivalent to me co-signing
Mm-hmm.
the act.
Mm-hmm.
For me, because I'm in Philly. Like, you see everything, man. In Philly is like a crazy place. You see literally everything, and all of these things are illegal. Drugs are illegal. Certain drugs are illegal. Prostitution is illegal. All of these things are illegal, but all of these things are openly done.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like there's a lot of wasted bureaucracy surrounding those things just because of how ineffective it is. And the same thing goes with marijuana. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that has been illegal all of my life, but I remember smoking marijuana when I was 11, and
Mm-hmm.
getting it was very, very easy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just felt like there's a lot of useless bureaucracy surrounding these things. And I feel that if people want to do these things with their bodies and they're adults, they should be able to do it. I mean, I think it's kind of crazy how, and I never talk about prostitution because it's not something that I care about at all.
Yeah.
Honestly, like I have no dog in that fight, man. But I do think it's kind of crazy that prostitution is illegal. But if you do everything in front of a camera and it's
Right.
considered porno, then it's
Yeah.
like fair
It's
game.
okay. Yeah.
I don't see any
Yeah.
consistency there. I don't see why one should be legal and the other one should be illegal.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point, and I think I was like this the same way with prostitution. It's like obviously it's not something that I support, but it was like, okay, you got to let people do what they want to do, but and just like having some talks with some people. Like I had there's a podcast coming out next week with a woman who was trafficked. She was trafficked for 10 years, and she was an adult, like, and it was just like, oh, this is something like you think that, hey, that they're this is something that they're actively participating in willingly. It's like, no, there's a lot of coercion
Right.
that happens with this. So, where's the balancing act of, okay, people can do this, but then if we let them do this, now it's encouraging the behavior or encouraging trafficking.
Mm-hmm.
So there's laws against it, but I've come to kind of right now. My opinion is, well, if you allow it, it's just going to encourage more trafficking, and that's not a culture that I want to. That's not the culture that I want to grow up in, or my kids to grow up in, or
Right.
But also, it's like I don't want to impose my views on others. Like I want them, like. So it goes back to my religious background. It's like God doesn't impose on me. I make the choice to follow in that direction. And that's what I think he wants. But then, just living where we live, it's like, well, I don't want to create the conditions where trafficking is encouraged or pornography is encouraged. And these things are things that are happening. And like you said, they're happening out in the open. But if we were to just, open up the floodgate, so to speak, does that make it even worse? So I guess there's other issues that go along with it. I guess policing and actually enforcing the laws.
Yeah, and there's also another side of that. Just another way to look at that as well is the trafficking surrounding prostitution. I don't know all the ins and outs of it, honestly. So I'm not speaking like from a position that I've researched, but my suspicion is that a lot of it is due to its prohibition. And because people operate in the shadows, because there is nowhere where you can just go and start working in sex work, legally, there's a lot of things that happen in shadows. And the only reason why I suspect that is because I see that in drugs and marijuana in particular. For a long time, Mexico was supplying us our weed. And Mexico has not that great weed compared to what they grow out in Cali. But that used to be the main supplier, and there was so much trafficking, there was so much death surrounding it. It was literally like fuel for the cartels to operate in the way that they do, which is much like terrorists. You know what I mean? So and that can be traced back to prohibition, and we saw that with the prohibition of alcohol as well. Al Capone and his gangsters. It was the prohibition that led to people operating in the shadows and all of these bad things occurring. My suspicion is that it's going to be something similar with sex work being illegal. That there's a lot of things that are operating in the shadow. You have pimps and all this stuff. Pimps would not even exist if sex work was legal. It's because it's illegal that it exists. Just like cartels would not have all of the financing that they have, or even have any purpose to organize if they didn't have customers over here on the black market. And so I don't know all the ins and outs of sex work because, like I said, it's not something I focus on, because you'll never see me promoting that, because I think it's degeneracy, honestly. But
I think a case study could be made as far as the marijuana stuff, but the laws here are considerably more relaxed than they were 20 years ago, but there's still cartel fights in Mexico. So I guess but then again, you have a government that's very corrupt in Mexico. So I mean that could be a whole other thing. As far as like the sex work, I think a new parallel could be made with gambling, because gambling is now being legalized, but I don't know if the underbelly or the appetite for gambling is the same as something as primal as sex. So
Right.
like you said, I mean, we're no magicians. That we're just having the conversation, because it's like, hey, where do we kind of have our guardrails if we have them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, honestly, I'm like you said, like we're just talking. I don't even ever like entertain the idea of sex work to even know like what goes. I know that there's a lot of trafficking that goes on, really horrible stuff, and trust me, like that, to me, that falls within the non-aggression principle. Like that is a major aggression upon the life of a young girl or any girl.
Right.
It's just a male figure overpowering a weaker person, and just using them in that manner is it's completely evil, man. So like in a libertarian society, those type of things it's not like you get like on the left, you get like all this like kind of like sense of like degeneracy that's brewing, like we saw with like Cuties on Netflix. The most libertarians like completely rejected the notion that was okay. You did have like I think like one person at Reason, that publication called Reason,
right,
they defended it.
Yeah,
And one thing I was proud to see was like they got ratioed into oblivion by libertarians who were against that. So we honestly, as a movement, do not promote that type of degeneracy. We do have safeguards, and particularly involving sex trafficking. That's just a huge violation against libertarian.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, because I think it was Dennis Prager who was talking about like slavery and how the Bible was used to justify slavery, but then he went to the the 10 Commandments and he says, "Thou shalt not steal." You can't steal somebody. You can't steal their labor. That's where that principle is already. So that you can misinterpret it, but it's already right there. So it's kind of the same thing with the non-aggression, right? It's like, okay, you can have sex work with willingly consenting people, not advocating it morally, but just from a freedom principle or a liberty principle, as long as the woman is not being abused, coerced.
Right.
Not something I advocate, but go ahead and go. I did want to touch on it because we're getting here almost 2 hours. You said that you don't consider yourself Republican, but what are your thoughts on like somebody like Rand Paul?
I would if somebody like Rand Paul were to run for president and they became the nominee of the Republican Party, it would really depend on who is the Libertarian candidate that year. Because I'm still like, even though it's probably never going to happen, I'm hoping that somebody amazing becomes the nominee of the Libertarian Party one year. I probably will never happen, but so it really would boil down to that: who is the Libertarian nominee, and what do I like? How I have to really weigh my options. Rand Paul is also a Libertarian and he's running as a Republican. So who is the better candidate, and it's just going to boil down to that for me. But chances are, if Rand Paul is running, chances are that he has my vote, because I do view him as a pragmatist. Even though he is a libertarian, he will navigate the current system that we have to bring us in the right direction. So if he was running, there's a big chance that he would get my vote.
Because he does. I mean, I'm not like political junkie. It's just like, he seems like he's pretty consistent as far as like small government issues and issues of tax and big spending bills that are coming across. Because if we're looking at the left, it seems like the left from 20 years ago has lurched far left, because I think that a lot of leftists, instead of going a third party route, just kind of went into the Democratic Party because that's where our home was, and then slowly and then rapidly had this huge leftward lurch, and now we have the right, which is, in theory, freedom of speech, and for the Constitution. So that seems like that'd be a place pragmatically where libertarians and Republicans could kind of like, hey, we could meet on these issues
Right.
and work on them to get them done.
Yeah.
I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that Rand Paul, he has the potential to kind of like shift the tides in the Republican Party and actually um, bring it back to that focus of small government and low taxes. Because where we're at right now with Donald Trump, that's just certainly not the case. And I'm not saying that as somebody who just continually bashes Trump, because I try not to be that person. Like for me, I want to give him his credit whenever it's due. And spending is just not there. In government spending, I don't, it's not great. It's not something that I would expect from a small government party. But there are good things in the Republican Party, and that's why I align myself much more with Republicans than I do Democrats. In fact, I probably will never ever vote for a Democrat for the rest of my life because I don't see it turning around anytime soon. And they're just morphing into something very scary.
Mm-hmm.
What I really, really hope is that the Republicans don't just react to that in terms of how big the government is going to be. Like if the Democrats are proposing like a $30 trillion plan, I hope we don't have Republicans coming and proposing a $20 trillion plan just to see more.
Left, like Democrat light or leftist light. Yeah.
Like I want the party to be based more concretely on the principle of small government, and even if that goes against like prior norms, small government does include like getting rid of agencies like the DEA or I'm sorry, the ATF or even the DEA, depending how radical you want to be, with small government.
Mm-hmm.
The DEA, the ATF, like the ATF should not exist. Like it's the states who should be making any type of law. Well, let me backtrack. There should be no gun laws at all. If we were to interpret the Second Amendment, in its context, it should not be infringed upon. But given the situation that we're in now, gun laws there are many. There's many ways to end up in jail as it pertains to guns, depending on what state you're living in. And I think that that's where it needs to be returned to first. Like all the power needs to go back to the states 100%. And there should not be a federal agency regulating guns. Because if I'm okay with somebody that I like directing the ATF, I have to be okay with somebody that I don't like.
Yeah.
If AOC ever came to power, I would not want her to have control over the ATF. You know what I mean? Because that would be completely against my interest. But that is one thing that we always have to take into account is the behavior of power and how it swings back and forth, left and right.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that you make. It's just like, are you only okay with it because it's your guy?
Right.
Are you okay with it when it's the guy that you would never in a million years want?
Right.
And if so, then think twice about it. And I think that's, I don't know, what is it? Chesterton's fence. Don't knock down a wall until you know why it was there in the first place. And I think the founders did a great job of putting up those fences. And they're not talking about law specifically, but if you were to put up a fence,
right,
I think that would be good. I think we're coming up here towards the end here, David, but so I just wanted to kind of wrap it up here. Did you have any kind of interest in pursuing a career in politics or being active, or is it just kind of for right now, working on family and stuff?
Yeah, right now I'm working on family. I do have plans to become more active in the community. As far as taking an actual position in politics, I'm very, very hesitant to do that. But it's not something that I would just write off. It's something I would certainly consider. But it would be a last option, like for me. Like it's not something that I'm interested in doing. Actually, I don't want to ever become a public figure that for everyone to just kind of target. Like I do believe in promoting the message of liberty, but I want to do it as a citizen as opposed to like an actual politician. I don't know why I feel like when you actually become a politician, you pretty much are ridding your entire life of privacy.
Yeah.
And I'm a very, very private person, like very, like
Yeah.
it's odd. My wife had to get used to the way I am because
Yeah.
I don't even like, there's no light in my house because all my curtains are closed.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like,
I
I
hear
don't
you.
want anybody walking by and looking inside my house. I'm just
Yeah.
weird like that. So, the idea of becoming a politician just kind of, it bothers me because I feel like I'd just be sacrificing my privacy
Right.
entirely. So I would, if I could avoid doing that, I certainly will. But again, it's not something I would totally write off. I would consider it if I felt like it's something that would be beneficial to Americans in general.
Mm,
But I have really no interest in ruling over people at
right.
all.
And
Yeah,
those are usually the people that you want because there's
right.
no interest.
Right, right. Yeah, the one that's one thing I learned from Jordan Peterson. He's like, if there is power to be had, the ones who really want it are the ones that are going to go after it and get it, and those are the ones you don't want to have
Yeah.
it. And I think that there's a lot of wisdom in that line of thinking, man. I would just love it if we didn't have these issues to have to deal with at all, but it's not the case. So I'm just playing it by ear. I definitely wouldn't become a politician here in Maryland. I would wait till I return to Philadelphia. I feel like there's a lot more to be gained there, honestly, because there's a lot of libertarians walking around who don't know that they're libertarians,
Mhm.
but they certainly are. In Philly, I just, it was, as a bad of a rap as Philly gets, I actually really like the city. It has a charm to it that I can't put my finger on. Just got to kind of get past all of the, murders and all of the drugs that are turning people into zombies. I feel
Yeah.
like, Philly is a special place, man, because you kind of get the best of both worlds there. Because like you originally thought that it was a highly regulated city, just like New
Mhm.
Jersey would be, but because it's not, it's a really interesting place to live because you can live as a Republican in Philly,
Mhm.
and be like Second Amendment to the teeth, and I just think it's an interesting dynamic because you kind of come across people from all different walks. You come across the Antifa types, the hipsters, and a little bit of everything there, man.
Mhm.
So that is the place that if I ever got into politics, it would be at local level politics there,
Mhm.
particularly in Philly.
Very cool, man. Well, hey, I appreciated you hopping on. I've always wanted to speak to you. The privacy thing, I feel you on that. Like, I've had this podcast idea for a while now, and it was just like, I don't want people to know me. I'd rather just go to work and everything. But
Yeah.
just something that I was like, hey, I've been really interested in. So I appreciate you coming on and speaking, David. It's nice to meet you, and I appreciate your time. You're welcome back anytime, brother. So this is the Read Your Keys podcast. You can find David on Twitter at Latinos for Liberty, and his handle is let's see, Latinos Latinos, the number 4 LIB lib.
Hmm.
David, thanks so much for coming on tonight, man.
Thanks so much for having
Appreciate
me.
you.
It's been a pleasure, man.
All right, have a good one.
You too. Thanks.